Cause Rick the Rainer easily does away with B-O-L-O-G-N-A. Cause Rick the Rainer kick 'em all away. They're B-O-L-O-G-N-A. You're all garbage, that type talk I'm on. Dumb one, becoming glad the great one walks among. Whispering couple, I scuffle. You little fleabag Negroes don't want any trouble. Ricker own clout, sewn bout, liquor thrown out. How till death I kick a bone out. Why pursue, provoke object? My record will be barking all through your broke project. Slick Rick, Roz, you know what I'm saying? It's all that.
Richard Martin Lloyd Walters, aka Slick Rick, born January 14th, 1965. When first recommended this feature, immediately the name caught my eye for a few reasons. I thought, what an unlikely name to see as a suggestion, then thought, I'd enjoy the process of doing a Slick Rick story, as he's one of the coolest MCs in rap history, with a look and sound that, if nothing else, makes him unique and interesting. But then I think, no way did Slick Rick have his growth stunted, with all he's accomplished over his career through numerous classic hip-hop songs, a classic album, a style like none other than he and maybe Big Daddy Kane, but most of all, his flow was just perfect for him. Anyone else attempting to bite his flow would be embarrassed because too many other elements made it attractive that it's hard to mimic. No one else had his cadence of almost talking on the record, making all his words clear, easy to understand and follow along with. His appearance with the eye patch kept your attention, as you don't see many people wearing them, especially not a rapper, and the story behind why he wears it all plays together, presenting a character of sorts to attach to and feel just as cool as the music. Then, of all things, he was one of, if not the greatest storyteller in rap history, along with Biggie, Nas, Tupac, and maybe Scarface. But Slick's way of storytelling was in a league of its own entirely. Unlike anyone else I've seen, Rick managed to mix a few different styles all in one to tell a story, and it worked flawlessly. He used his well-spoken dialect and slow delivery as a way the listener can focus. He usually changed into different characters with his voice that kept the interest, seen done later by Eminem, Nicki Minaj, and more, and the pictures he painted were so relatable and realistic that they entrench you into the story and you can't turn away. He was a master storyteller in a children's book written by an MC for all ages kind of way. I still remember Children's Story being a constant skate rink track growing up in the Caribbean, so I know American skate rinks for Slick Rick's music was a hotbed. My interest in a Slick Rick story was piqued to say the least. Then, admittedly, after having to do a little research, since Slick Rick wasn't exactly my era, I learned that his story could be the definition of stunted growth. It had a promising start, going platinum on his debut album, but then incarceration happened and things from there were all a huge rush and then an abrupt halt. What happened to hip-hop's greatest storyteller, Slick Rick? Let's talk about it. It's your boy JC, Stunted Growth Music. Let's get it, man. Take a minute to like, subscribe, and comment on who I should do next. You can also send a super thanks by clicking the button below. Enjoy the video. Slick Rick is a hip-hop artist that began rapping all the way back in the mid-80s. He spent the first 11 years of his life in a London, England suburb called Mitcham, where he was born, and at just 18 months old, a shard of broken glass damaged his right eye, which is why he wears the infamous eye patch today. That ironically was the icing on top that made his character that more interesting. As a child, he would be teased often because of it and didn't always know how to respond, so he'd just stay in the house or the classroom and write stories and rap them as a way to distract his bullies. He moved to Manhattan, New York at 11 years old and began turning those stories into rap, and it was genius. He began to take rap more serious and was no longer the goofy London kid. He was now Slick Rick. He joins Dougie Fresh's Get Fresh crew in 1985 and releases 2 classic hip-hop songs with Dougie Fresh beatboxing, Call the Show and Lottie Dottie, leading to his debut album in 1988 that's universally considered a classic hip-hop album. Stunt number 1, Missing So Much Time. The most interesting thing about Slick Rick's story is him serving over 5 years in prison for attempted murder and issues with immigration services that were the bulk of that time. In 1986, he signed on with Russell Simmons' management company and eventually to Def Jam as one of the first rappers to sign with the label. On November 1st, 1988, his debut album was released, led by classic hit singles Hey Young World, Children's Story, and Teenage Love. The album was well received and went #1 on Billboard, eventually being named one of the greatest hip-hop albums of all time. At this point, Slick Rick had the storytelling game on lock. He was different from many rappers in lots of ways, and his skills were always on point. As the album and Slick Rick is continuing to grow, his mother hires a bodyguard for him who's actually Rick's older cousin. At some point, the cousin becomes unsatisfied with compensation and is fired, so attempts to extort Slick Rick, and when he wouldn't get the money he asked for, he would then try his hand at robbing Rick on multiple occasions and threaten to harm he and his mother if he wasn't paid. The final straw was Rick coming home to bullet holes in his front door. On July 3rd, 1990, after receiving word his former bodyguard was around the neighborhood looking for him, Rick decided to load his car with weapons and set out on a mission to find him first, and he just so happens to see him standing outside in the distance. He fires the first shot, hitting a bystander, then a few more, hitting the target in the foot. In a panic, he sped off and lost control of the vehicle and smashed into a tree. He was sentenced to 2 years and 3 more for the issues he had with immigration. He'd spent 5 years and 12 days in prison, and it took away the buzz he had and caused his name to drown out in the industry while away. Stunt number 2, poor sales and effort. After having the top-selling album in the country on album 1, Slick Rick had it all. The confidence, the look, the personality, the talent, and platinum experience all backing him. Expectations were for him to continue the success he was having since going platinum and to become a huge star in hip-hop with his unique style. But because of his incarceration and the responsibility to still pay bills, he had to release a sophomore album from behind bars for the most part, besides being released on bail. Album 2, The Ruler's Back, dropped July 2nd, 1991 and failed to reach the heights Album 1 did in quality, financially, or chart performance. Being locked up, you have no real way to promote and push an album, so most forgot about Slick Rick as time moved on. He releases album number 3, Behind Bars, and faced the same issues of lack of promotion and inability to fully capitalize on dropping a new album. Slick Rick admits to both albums not being his best works because of all he was dealing with and his mindset to hurry to finish the necessary songs for 2 albums instead of making the best possible album he could make. Stunt number 3, The After Effects. And lastly, what stunted the growth of Slick Rick and took him from possibly on the Rushmore of rap to just an okay catalog on paper was the after effects of having to go to prison for that long, all while trying to steer a rap career. He was freed in 1997 and it took 2 years before another album released. Imagine the creativity that could have came from Slick Rick from 1990 all the way to 97, missing the bulk of that time due to prison, then reacclimating himself back in the world and in hip-hop. The Art of Storytelling album was released May 1999 and peaked at number 8 on Billboard and was critically acclaimed, although it didn't have the hits like his debut did, but still went gold, in my opinion, because of all the hype of his return to the world and music. But after that, no more albums, just a few singles here and there since 1999. He made a bad decision attempting to solve the problem with his cousin in the streets, and it caused him the bulk of his creativity and hip-hop to miss out on the potential he had as an MC. All in all, Slick Rick still lived a great life of a rapper and is still able to be financially supported from his music today at 57 years old. I still believe even though he didn't reach his full potential, he was still a great rapper and a standout of his era with only 4 albums, missing pretty much the entire 90s. He was arrested again in 2001 by immigration services after attempting to enter the US illegally and served the next 17 months in prison once again. He was finally granted US citizenship in 2016 after being in America since 11 years old. I can only imagine the topics he would have touched on had he not been imprisoned, which drained his potential, and for these reasons, his growth to be stunted. Salute, much respect. It's your boy JC, Stunted Growth Music, and I'm out.